far away.
Hello.
Hi, Corina.
Hello and welcome. I wanted to ask you a few questions about teaching and learning. And I just wanted to know what is learning and what is teaching to you? How do you break those ideas down?
At the risk of sounding scientific, learning really is the process of growing dendrites. It's a sort of it's a chemical and physiological reaction in the brain that happens when the brain gets confronted with information that doesn't fit an existing pattern. Mm-hmm. And so what the brain's got to do is generate a new set of connections that can, at the risk of inventing a word, sort of patternise that experience. So learning, in some ways that's quite a simple thing. So if I have a change, like for example, the last couple of years I rode to work a particular way, and my brain learnt that way, and you feel yourself almost subconsciously having learnt that journey, where to slow down, where to speed up, the intersections to watch out for, the kinds of things that can go wrong, and so on. And you almost get into a state of knowledge about that, that you have genuinely learnt it. Then you change location and you have to get to work a different way. And the brain feels that initial discomfort and says, can't we just go back to doing it the way we did it before? It felt so easy. Yeah. And you have to be pushed to say, no, we're gonna grow some new dendrites, we're going to create some new connections. Mm-hmm. And so you take a new route, and then gradually that becomes sufficiently a part of you to be able to declare that you've learned it. Yeah. So that's what learning is. And then the question of teaching becomes, how do you instigate that process, support that process, nourish that process, reward that process, such that you can either speed it up or you can send it on new journeys that you wouldn't otherwise have embarked on. So that's when people talk about a learning journey, it's a meaningful metaphor to me. Mm-hmm. But it's a kind of, it's a scientific brain process journey that teachers, good teachers, spark into activity and seem to be able to nurture effectively.
And when did you know that that was something that you wanted to do or be a part of?
Well, I think when you learn things, I guess I've always been a sort of metacognitive human being, and I don't know when that began or why it began, but there's always been a part of me that tends to stand back from myself and look at what's going on and why it's going on that way. So I was always interested in the things that helped me learn, and then just feeling like it's exciting to learn, and would it be exciting to teach? I studied law at university, but I didn't ever really, when I reflect on it, I was interested in the intellectual process, still am, but not in the practice of it. And so there was a part of me that always wanted to be a teacher. So I got into teaching at a pretty young age. In fact, at that stage you could, I had my degree, a law degree, and I didn't have a teaching qualification at that point. I went into teaching. Yeah. When I was 22, I think, and then I did my teacher training after I'd started actually teaching, which was not a bad way to do it either, and loved it.
Okay, yeah, I was just thinking about how I got into this. I definitely describe myself as quite curious when I was young, and always wanted to know things, and I think it was also fostered at school. I
Yep.
feel that I was lucky and I went to a quote-unquote good school, and where it was okay to learn and
Yep.
okay to ask questions and to want to know more and
Yep.
to be to be critical and to analyse. So I think, yeah, that's where it came from, and yeah, I think it's quite important, the influences that you have when you're young.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, some of which you probably don't even know that
Yeah.
they're happening. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I wanted to think about being first introduced to computers or technology. When did that happen and how did that happen?
Just trying to think. So 77, 83. About probably about 1982. Yeah. I'd actually changed schools from a school where I taught for the first 6 years of my teaching career, and computers were at that stage still big machines that I had no real contact with other than to punch holes in cards when I was a school student. But the school I went to after that, there was a physics teacher there who had purchased a couple of Apple IIes for the school, and he was playing around with it, and we're talking very, basic sort of computers, monochrome monitors, dot matrix printer, keyboard input. Although I think the 2E might have had a mouse as well. First Apples, don't know, can't remember. And anyway, he taught me a little bit about programming the computer, and that was really the beginning of it. And then when I moved from that school to the next school, I was fortunate really to have another colleague who was kind of way ahead of me, and they had BBC microcomputers, and he actually had built a network of BBC microcomputers for kids to get an introduction to computing at the school. At that stage, I was head of business studies and was involved in the teaching of commerce, and in terms of the Australian education system, the commerce area had sort of captured computing because it had grown out of typewriting effectively. And so I well remember in about 1986, I think, I was involved in the development of what was the state of Victoria's first, as it turned out, I didn't know it was the first until I was told it was the first, general application-based computer program for upper middle school students, and we developed it at the school I was at with a team of interested people, the colleague that I spoke of earlier, and a couple of others, and a consultant that I knew from the Subject Association who worked with us, and by that stage the government was getting interested in making kids, bringing kids up to speed a bit more in computing, and so they asked me to be involved in developing a new course for the upper secondary area that wasn't so much computer or programming based, it was computer application based, and that had sort of become a bit of a field for me, although I had no qualifications in the area, and it sort of been self-taught. So then developed a course called Information Processing and Management, and that actually became reasonably popular, and then they wanted a textbook written, and so my colleague and I wrote the textbook,
Excellent.
and so it went on, and so it just grew and grew, and from that stage I was found myself working with, and this is where so much can happen if you get together with like-minded, enthusiastic colleagues.
Yeah.
And, I found myself on committees and groups working with other people in the field, and So we started to look at one-to-one computing and what would happen if kids had laptop computers and so on. And then the school I was at was actually was the second school in the state of Victoria to introduce a one-to-one compulsory laptop program from year 5 right through to the end of secondary school.
Okay, and what does that mean exactly? Each student has a laptop?
Every student had their own computer, and then as the internet came online, which wasn't really until the mid-90s, I think it must have been about 95, around that time, that same sort of group of people were becoming aware of just what an extraordinarily powerful tool the internet was, and so we started to experiment with that. Networking was just something that was not so. When we started to get into looking at what the capacity was for networking within a school, which then led into collaboration, and then you put the network collaboration alongside internet connectivity, and you started to be able to talk about online discussion groups. Then we had a librarian who wanted to get involved in that, and I set up a collaboration across 2 schools with another colleague. I actually went back to teaching some legal studies for a year or so with a senior class, and hooked up with a colleague that I'd worked with some years before, and we actually taught our 2 classes in 2 different schools collaboratively. And we did that must have been around 2000. 1998, 2000, somewhere around that stage, and the technology was up to that, and that was really exciting stuff. That was, and then I guess because I'd moved into administration, I then tended to shift my focus to how could computer technology support student administration and timetabling and all those sorts of things. So I became less directly involved with computer supported learning and more involved in infrastructure, school infrastructure development. But those 2 things merged in the end as well, because now you've got learning management systems operating within schools that do all of that sort of stuff.
So is that VLE? I know I've been reading about PLEs and VLEs, virtual learning
environments. And I don't know that it's advanced much. When I now look at what's happening in schools, it doesn't feel much different to what it felt like in, say, 2000. Yes, teachers are transferring work to kids. They're putting up assignments online. Whether they're doing it through Google Docs or Weebly's or some other form of central lodgement process. They're being sent work by students. They're marking work. Some of them online. But no, that's part of my frustration in a way.
More.
Yeah, when I look at what happened between the mid-80s and the mid to late 90s, I would say that progress has slowed. And then when you think, how could it be that progress has slowed or even stagnated when, the rest of the technological world has just gone, Moore's law has gone berserk technologically with very little impact in schools, I think.
I feel what you're saying is very advanced, as in I am yet to do the things that you're describing. I mean, these are things that I would like to do in China. Co-teaching with and collaborating with another school online. I just feel, it seems to me that you are very much at the forefront, and it's something that I'm yet to do.
Well, you bleed. The bleeding edge is literally the bleeding edge, because a lot of the stuff was hard to do at that stage. Networks were pretty unreliable. Teachers did get quite frustrated because the internet would go down. or it would just be too slow. And now it's like all of that stuff works. I mean, our internet at school just doesn't go down. Like you might get a notice. I think there's been one time this year where a notice came out from the IT department saying that somewhere around about 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon we're going to bring the servers down. And you kind of, it occurred to me then, I was thinking, like your initial reaction is, oh, that's going to be frustrating. And then you think, heck, just think about it. I've gone for months, and nothing's gone wrong. And yet still, I had a teacher come into my office with a computer, the students wanted to ask some questions of me. So they were doing some survey. They were little primary school kids, and she wanted to film the principal speaking to the kids and so on. So she got out an iPad and she couldn't make it work. Like I kind of had to show her how to. And I don't mind showing her, but I kind of think it's just not good enough in 2014 for somebody who calls herself a school teacher to not be able to capture visual images. You know? These kids live in a visual world.
I see what you're saying, but I think, it comes down to, or it comes back to training that we were talking about before. Perhaps this teacher has not been exposed to this.
Yeah, although is it that, or is the desire there to learn?
Also, this is also a big issue.
Because some teachers some teachers are not innate learners to me. They may be formal learners, like they may want to do a master's in this and a master's in that. But then they don't feel to me like intrinsic learners. But the ones that are intrinsic learners, however you pick them and identify them, are the ones that seem to me to be natural teachers.
I see. So people should, or teachers should recognise that there is something lacking, or that there's something new. And
they should be critical. They shouldn't just jump into it because it exists. So, that's the electronic whiteboard is the classic technological example of a waste of space. And I've seen a couple of people stunningly capable of using electronic whiteboards. And we had a maths teacher at the last school I was at in Australia. It was just extraordinary to sit in a lesson and watch her. She used all of its capacity to just finish drawing circles and graphs for her. So she knew how the software could automate the boring part of processes. She could bring students out to the front who could then exhibit their understanding by tapping on the screen and moving things around. And then I remember at the end of it, at the end of the lesson, it had obviously occurred to her that there was a student who was away, and she just said, just a sec, I need to, just before we move on, to store that work, because that's the part of this topic that this particular girl struggles with, and it will be good for her to watch the recording of the lesson that we've just done on the whiteboard, and she stored it, and then she emailed it to the student from the room. The whole thing would have interrupted the lesson by about a minute. And you've got to talk about differentiated learning, and you think of what had just been done for that individual girl. Now, that's the pinnacle of electronic whiteboard use.
I see.
You see it, like the schools have essentially invested millions and millions of dollars in half a dozen of those teachers across the state of Victoria. The rest of the people, all they've done is buy a very expensive computer projector. And
you say that because the teachers don't know how to use it.
And again, there is some, like for that maths teacher, there obviously was some sort of what was it in her that said, like, training is always offered. Like, all these people, when they've introduced the whiteboards, they bring in these trainers, and you do that training, but but do the teachers want to have the training? She did, obviously, and then she took that training and she built on it. And so, it's still technology application through the exception rather than the rule. I think. Look, there are good things that you see with iPads in primary schools. You do see some good stuff with electronic whiteboards. But I always reflect on why did the electronic whiteboard take off so quickly and have so much spent on it? And I think the answer is because it's still teacher-centred. There was something, it's a very cynical view, I know, but there was that sense that this is a piece of technology with which teachers are extremely comfortable because they can stay located at the front of the room. It has all of the kids, it's the converse of individualised instruction, really. Instead, it's all eyes funneled on the centrepiece, and so it almost didn't challenge that centrality of the teacher in front of the class, in front of the room, and so the teachers lapped that up and said, well, "This is good. We can integrate technology and not have to change." That's my cynical view of it. And so, I've got a school now that's got electronic whiteboards in about 70% of the rooms, and I walk around and for the most part I see projectors. That's not useless. It's just an expensive way of projecting a computer screen image onto a whiteboard.
So, okay, IWB is perhaps a tool that you don't like. Are there any digital tools that you can recommend or that
I
you
don't like it. Like,
or?
if all teachers were like that maths teacher,
yeah, sure.
not a problem. But they're not. No. Tools that I like to see.
Worthy of a mention.
Yeah. I think the use of touch in primary education particularly, even in early childhood education, the growing use of visual images, I see that changing a lot. I think that's one of the thing I'd get into now most. I think if I were still teaching, if I was in the classroom, I would be recognising that these students live in a visual world. I mean, what is it about the selfie? That sort of fascinates me in a way. It's I kind of look at it and think, why would I take photographs of what I'm eating? And why would I, sit here and share it all around? And then I kind of think, we know that the brain, wherever you can attach emotional responses to learning, you get really powerful outcomes. And we realise that, and we're all social beings, so somehow what we're seeing is a new kind of social order. How does education, so this is my current sort of educational questions, how do we piggyback on that visually based sense of social engagement and use it to power understanding? So that's where that's where my thinking goes now. Yeah. It's around photographs, it's around video, it's around capturing understanding and showing understanding through a visual world, and being brave enough to recognise, like the book's dead, but reading's not dead.
I share the same sentiment. I think about like studying Chinese here, and I'm very much aware that I'm a strong visual learner, and I really struggle because it's still the teacher and the textbook, and I just need to see something, and even if it's a still image, I would like a moving image, but if it's a still image, I can deal with that, and I can interact with it somehow.
And then you kind of look at something like the Oculus Rift and that kind of immersive 3D lived experience is still in its infancy, but think how that's going to revolutionise education.
Actually, last week we were reading about virtual worlds, and we had a meeting in Small Worlds, which was a lot of fun. Do you have any experience with virtual worlds and learning?
No, just watching my son, who's quite a gamer, immerse himself in those kinds of experiences, and then you look at things like the gamecraft movement, and I think some of the most popular YouTube channels are kids sharing their experiences of gamecraft.
Okay.
There's all these sorts of things in it. So what is that telling us about kids? And instead of coming at it from the point of view of, as a lot of certainly Chinese parents, in my experience, see that as frighteningly irrelevant to the future of their children, and that you have to protect them from that and keep them away and doing the kind of good hard study that will get them the certifications that will sift and sort them into the universities needed. But in reality, those things tell us something about the different kind of world that these kids are growing up into. They are living in a really different world to the one that the teachers who are teaching them exist in.
Yeah, I agree.
It's tough.
I wanted to think about your students, and because you've been saying that they're growing up in a different world to what we did in the past, and we have these assumptions about their computer ability or agility.
Yeah.
Are all of your students tech savvy?
They're not quite sure what the right language is, but I think the difference between there were some phases in it. I don't think I ever really got to teach digital natives, but now the kids in schools are digital natives, and I think that means that they don't notice the technology. One of the things that I watched happen a bit in Australia was that as I was doing some of that early stuff in the development of computer-related courses, those courses were incredibly popular. And then by the time I left Australia, they were coming off. And I've noticed, I've looked at the figures recently, they're dropping, and the number of kids actually enrolling in computer-related courses is diminishing rather than growing. And I think that's because they just don't see. It's like taking a course in breathing. Why would you?
Right.
I breathe fine.
Yeah.
Not in Beijing, but and so you're kind of saying, well, why would I want to do a course in computing? I just do it.
Yeah.
It's a shame because, of course, there are lots of justifications for and opportunities that are computer related, but that's what's happening, and I think that's part of the consequence of digital natives. They just naturally grab these devices, but that goes back again to touch. They grab mobile devices, they grab touch devices. We're still within the school that I'm at now, discussions going on around will we specify MacBooks or this type of computer or that type of computer, and you kind of think what an irrelevant question. What is it that the kids in the school want to do, and who cares? I mean, if what they want to do is to take photographs, edit videos, and share them, I don't know, they've got a device that does that in their pocket.
Yeah.
What are you wanting to do? Email them stuff and have them email stuff to you? There wouldn't be a kid in the room who didn't have 2 or 3 devices.
Yeah.
Probably they're pretty affluent kids that were capable of doing that. Why on earth would we sit there and tell them that we're wanting this piece of technology or that piece of technology? And the answer is because all of the people making those decisions are non-digital natives. Right?
Yeah.
They're my generation, or dare I say your generation, who are not really digital natives either. All sort of saying, well, you know, what equipment do you need to do these sorts of things? And, you know, who's going to be responsible for repairing it? And, you know, some of those legitimate cost questions, you know, I get, but no, that's not the world in which we live. We live in a world where you just use whatever technology is available that works for you to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And so the school's job is to invent the problem that generates the learning. And then when the kid says, I've got nothing available to me to help solve that problem, then to suggest to them, well, you know, one of the things you've got available is this piece of technology, and that, in fact, is very likely to be almost any available piece of technology. More and more of the software is becoming web-based. There are very few tools now that you can't access online. You're getting a lot of, and I think one of the interesting things about Microsoft is that they are recognising the opportunity of cross-platform availability. So instead of closing their system down, they're plonking it onto Android devices and Apple devices and so on. I think strategically that may turn out to be an extraordinarily powerful move, and I wonder how long the Apple closed notion will survive. Obviously it's immensely powerful at the moment, but I reckon it's got a shelf life that's limited. But we will wait to see in 10 years' time whether that still works.
So talking about predictions, you were expressing a kind of slight disappointment in the last, 10, 15 years. You're expecting more from technology. What changes were you expecting?
I think I expected something. I thought assessment would have moved on. I almost can't believe that so much of the world writes everything other than a short note with the editing capacity of a word processor. I mean, what do you? I write almost nothing where I don't have the capacity to check it before I hit send. Say, no, that's not quite what I meant, I'll go back and change that word. So much of what I do is collaborative, and I use technology for that. I would have sent half a dozen emails from my office not long before I left work, all of which, in one way or another, were designed to bring together big brain thinking, engaging other people, whether they were in Hong Kong or next door, so that we could all work together on solving some staffing issues. That's the world we work in now, and they will respond with ideas, and we'll put them kind of together. Fairly unimaginatively, technologically speaking, but technology will be at the heart of enabling that process of collaboration to find form and expression. And then we say to kids, come in, because we're going to come into this 2 hour, we're just doing it right at school this very minute. We've got all of our year 11, 12 and 13 students sitting mock exams, like practice exams, so that they can learn how to refine a totally irrelevant skill. Right? How to sit on your own for 2 hours without collaborating with a single person and write with your pen on a piece of paper your one rapid fire go at this response. So that probably encapsulates it. Like 20 years on from when people stopped doing that, that's what we're doing to young people.
Well, what will replace this form of assessment? How do we measure people's abilities? And I mean, I agree with everything you're saying, but
how does
trying
it change?
to visualise, what's the next step?
And it is that. That's why I find myself, often saying if I'm speaking that, is there anybody in the room who thinks that in 50 years' time kids are going to be sitting exams under those sorts of conditions? And nobody puts their hands up because everybody knows that's finished. And then you say 40 years' time, 30 years' time, and you start to see a whole audience say to themselves, but what could possibly replace it? And the answer for me is, I don't think anything will replace that single absurdity. I think the whole infrastructure that depends on it will crumble. Which is a much more radical kind of thing that I won't go through. But I think that might be the way it goes in the end, that the infrastructure crumbles, and then that single task within it no longer becomes relevant. Like, why do you need the 3-hour exam anyway? To sift and sort for tertiary entry. But the tertiary entry is a once in a lifetime, that's gradually dying out. Maybe certification systems will change, so maybe it becomes irrelevant. It's like the horse and cart becomes irrelevant, not because horses and carts stopped working. They work fine, they still work fine. It's just that they no longer became particularly useful.
I mean, some things are happening, online courses, MOOCs. If I think about Open University, they have some degrees where essentially you can make your degree. You can choose what's going to be in it, and I think that's
There's that lovely example of the kid. He's a bit of a precocious kid. He's about 12 years old. It's on YouTube of the kid who hacked his education, his early education, along with his parents. He calls it school hacking, I think. And his parents were quite happy for him to just enrol in different schools in the district, depending on where he thought it was being done well. He had a passion for skiing, so they allowed him to pursue that passion. Obviously very articulate sort of boy, but he did some things through the Khan Academy, and that's pretty unimaginative, but nevertheless, it's online. So he did all those sorts of things. They tell me that something like 5% of American kids now are homeschooled. That's big enough. That's not fringe dwelling at 5%, So maybe that becomes 10%, 12%, 15%, and perhaps then that becomes, instead of being a kind of weird and wonderful hippie option, it gets to a point where it's sufficiently normal that companies start to recognise that supporting homeschooling is an available profit centre, and so you start getting
I can see that happening, the normalisation of alternative learning, alternative education. I like it.
and that's the sort of thing that, because as I said the other day, I think the change will come from outside. I think that
when you say outside, you mean
that it won't. It won't be
or
teachers and schools that do it. It'll teachers and schools will have it done to them.
I see.
In much the same way as bank tellers had ATMs done to them, and oddly enough, nobody seems to think it's particularly. I mean, nobody would have walked into a bank and said to a bunch of tellers, "I've got this idea about an ATM." Like, why would you say that to a group of tellers? They're totally ill-equipped to manage that process, and then you extrapolate from that. Why would you say to a bunch of retailers in the 1960s, "I've had this idea of a credit card"? It's not in it for them. Like, why would they want to go down that path? So other people, it just happens around industries, but it's never yet happened around schools. That may change.
So I guess it's about adapting to the environment. Survival of the fittest.
So, schooling obviously has the capacity to last long enough for me to see my time out without being made irrelevant. But some of my successors, I think, will find themselves confronted with a very different world. Bring it on.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Well, thank you very much for your time.